Okay, so what we're going to look at today, I made a chart a little while back, and I don't know if it's really worth anything, if it's of any value to the community, but I just hope maybe it'll get some people thinking, and I do think there could be some insights here. I don't know if it could really help to show us where precious metals are going, but it's always good to look back at the past, and maybe we can learn something. But so this chart, and we'll get into the numbers here, was something I was working on, and it's really just a snapshot. It's a little bit lacking in terms of overall data, but what I was curious about was the total U.S. coin production of certain years when we still had silver coinage, and what the ratios were, how many half dollars they were making, dollars, quarters, dimes. As I made it, I thought it was also interesting to add the pennies, which is token money, and that's basically credit. So that was basically the mint just adding some grease into the wheel of the economy. But there's certain years I looked at, like 1964. Obviously, that's going to be one of those years where we had a very extremely high mintage of silver. The U.S. was growing to such a point by then where our economy should have been bigger by 1964 than it was in the 1940s, 30s, 20s, etc. And you had a lot more people. The population was growing. The baby boomers were all being born. But that was last year, and there's some anomalies, I think, in the data, because I think Salivate Metal said at one point that some of the silver coinage, and I don't know if it was all of it or if it was just the half dollars, I think was actually started in 1964, but they kept minting it and dating it, backdating it 1964. Maybe that was just the Kennedy half dollar. I'm not sure, but it could mean that the numbers are a bit of an anomaly. So the years I looked at was 1964. That was the last year of silver coinage in the U.S. And then 63, because I figured 63 should have also been a very high volume year, and it was, but not nearly as high as 1964. And then I went back to 1960 as well. I figured that would be fairly high, and it was, but that was actually not, it was only half of what they made in 63. And that's where the study gets a little bit more lacking, because I was hoping to do like some more years from the 1950s to get a better feel, and then the 40s, but the only other year I looked at was 1943, which was, the middle of World War II, and we were making a lot of silver coins. And then I wanted to go back a little further just to get a little more data, and I was looking at U.S. silver dollars because there was a gap. 1921, that would also be an interesting year because you had the Morgan dollars being made in 1921, and I think it was like the Pittman Act. We had some kind of surplus or something. They wanted to buy silver and I guess replenish the stockpile, maybe, because I know we had sold a lot of our silver stockpile to Britain after World War I, and of course Britain was using it mainly in their foreign markets for like Indian rupees. If you look at the mintage of silver rupees right after World War I, it's astronomical silver mintage numbers. But so we made a lot of these in 1921. And that said, again, that would be like an anomaly year. But I looked back a little farther. Before 1921, I think they stopped making dollars, like, it was around like 1904, 1905, I think. Something like that. And I was just looking through my red book at certain years, and there's some high mintages, obviously, when we started. I think this was the first year in 1879, and a lot of this was after we hit the Comstock lode in Nevada, a huge silver mine, Carson City. We made a mint there because of it, but the point being, we had a lot of silver we could start making. So these were actually very high years, 70s like this, 80s, 1890s. Long story short, I stopped on 1890 because I noticed it was a pretty high production year, it looked like. But it turned out to be a huge anomaly because if you looked at the quarters and the half dollars and maybe even the dimes we didn't make hardly any. Looking at the quarters represented 0.03% of the total coin production in 1890. The dimes were only 1.9%. The halves were like negligible, it's probably like 0.01%. It's a joke. But the dollar coins we made, 63% of the coined money was silver dollars. They made 38,042,414. And that's from all the combined mints. All these figures, when I put a total, like 11 million dimes, that was from all the mints that were in production that year. And I also put the silver figures, because that's another thing I was looking at. So that was 29,422,003 ounces troy of silver for the dollars. Just think about that. One of the things I wanted to look at was this compared to U.S. American Silver Eagle production. So, 2008, we made 20,583,000 eagles. And the two other higher years, 2011, we made 40 million. 2015, we made 47 million. Now, if you look at other mints, like the Canadian maples, similar figures, 7 million, 23 million, 30 million. Now, some of these mints, like, see the British mints, a question mark, they stopped releasing publicly their mintage figures. Same with the Canadian mint. I think the last year they stopped recording their mintage was 2014. And that's sad for a lot of reasons. In the United States, that would be unspeakable if a mint wasn't releasing their mintage figures. Coin collectors have a right to know, for one, but just, freedom of information. They claim it's proprietary. They don't want their competitors to know what they're doing. What a load of BS. But if you add and look at the Austrian Philharmonics, they made 7 million. 2011, 17 million. I don't know why it dropped off so much in 2015. Maybe the Europeans weren't buying as much by then. It was a different market back then. It wasn't as integrated as it is now. But obviously last year, I think the U.S. Mint made close to 30 million in 2020. And let's see, the Australian, they only came out with the red kangaroo around 2015, but that was a very small mint year. 2016, they stepped it up because I think the U.S. Mint was having trouble being dumbasses. Anyways, they made like 11 million then. 2020, they recorded 13 million. And of course, U.S. Mint made 30 million. And you can probably bet your bottom dollar the Canadian Mint made about 10 million or more probably. The Austrians might have made 10 million. So that was a pretty high mint year. I also put, I don't know if you can even trust these figures, Silver Institute. I guess I didn't put 2020. I should have. See, a lot of this is incomplete data. But I wanted to get your brains jogging and see if this is worthwhile to anybody to look at these figures. 2011, total coin demand was supposedly 118 million ounces. And 2015, it was 200 92 million. That includes bars. You can see in 2011 it would have been over 210 million or more. But then in 2015 went up to 292 million total coin and bar. Now jewelry really surprised me at 226 million ounces. Boy, that's a lot of silver rings. I mean, silver jewelry is so overpriced. If you're buying like a ring or a necklace, it's got like as much silver in as a $50, and it'll be like $40. And it's got like $8 worth of silver. I can't believe they're using that much silver. And do women really wear that much silver jewelry on their earrings and necklaces? 226 million ounces? That's incredible. I don't know who's wearing all that silver jewelry. That doesn't make sense to me. I didn't look at plateware, because that's interesting. I've got a little bit of silverware, but people don't buy this stuff anymore. Maybe if you get married, someone buys some silverware. But anyways, let's just look at the numbers again. I also looked at the 40% Kennedys, just to see, but it is surprising. 1965, they used 9.7 million ounces on those bad boys. 66, they did 16 million ounces in just 40% halves. 67, 43 million ounces were consumed in the making of 40% crummy. Yes, I'm going to call them crummy halves. To me, silver coinage should be no less than 80% ever under any circumstance. Otherwise, it's clown money. But anyways, 1968, another 36 million. Did I skip 69? 67, 68. And we jumped to 1970. I don't know. I might have skipped 69, it looks like. 1970, they didn't make as many. And I think I forgot about 69, maybe? Weird. Alright. Let's look at 1943 while we're here. So, just interesting stuff. Pennies, which are token money, represented 9.3% of the total dollar coinage that was minted. Dimes, 27%, quarters, 29%, half dollar. This was a high watermark year for half dollars. 33% of coined money in terms of dollar face value, $38 million worth, was half dollars. And that represented 28 million ounces of silver. Look at these numbers. 23 million ounces of dimes. Total coinage represented $116,711. And when you add up all the silver, the dimes, quarters, and halves, 1943 we used 76,409,000 ounces. Crazy, huh? Now, that's interesting too, because a lot of other countries were still using silver. Now, granted, during World War II, a lot of countries suspended their silver and were making, fiat or clad. But the British were still using 50%. And so I'd like to know how much silver Britain used, if somebody could come up with that figure. Look at total shillings, half crowns, pence, and then the Canadians. Now, Canada they've always been a much smaller country, so I don't expect much there. Mexico wasn't using as much back then, I don't think. But I think Japan and China were probably still using silver. Although China was in huge epic war, so maybe not. Australia was using silver, but a much smaller country. And India. They were probably still making silver rupees. So that'd be interesting. Now let's go back in time. Well, let's not look at 1890 yet. Let's go to the 60s. 1964, and that's one of the big, huge years. One of the reasons supposedly they stopped, using silver was because, I don't know if it was a coin shortage, but they needed to make more coin money because these figures are getting huge. I mean, they made how many pennies? 6 billion. They made 6.4 billion pennies that year. I mean, these numbers were growing exponentially. It was $64 million worth, and it represented 7.8% of total coined dollars. Dimes. 30% of total coin money. You're looking at, whoa, is that right? Okay, 1964 was a crazy, crazy year. 165 million ounces went into dimes. Quarters. You're looking at 228 million ounces. Quarters were 41.6% of coined money. Half dollars. Another big year. I mean, that was the 1964 Kennedy half. That's 155 million ounces. Total silver used, 549 million, 0.45 ounces troy. Crazy. Crazy. Can you imagine that? I mean, we're looking at the Silver Eagle production each year. They made 15 million last year, 15 million ounces. Oh, a big year, 40 million ounces. Can you imagine having the mint having to use 549 million ounces? Whew. On fuego. But you can see the other years, 63 and 60, weren't quite as high. They still did 109 million in 63. Now, like I said, you might have to put an asterisk next to 64, just because I think they kept making these in 65. But 63, 109 million ounces. Look at that year. Pennies represented 14.3% of coined money in 63. They made 2.5 billion. And they made a lot of half dollars too. 29% of coin money was halves. And you can look at the figures because I'm not going to read them all. $176 million worth of coined money. And then 60. This is crazy. 1960, 25% of coin money was pennies. I'm not just talking about the number of coins. I'm talking about face value. They minted $21 million worth of pennies that year. That is nuts. Token money. Token money. I don't know why, but, dimes are a bit of a workhorse. The first coin the U.S. Mint ever made in, I think, 1795, when the country was getting started, we needed dimes, small change, in circulation. So, actually, I think it was half dimes and dimes at the time. And so that was one of the, first coins that the U.S. Mint made. They're important. As you can see, they represent 43% of coin money in 60. Half dollars were a little smaller. And to overall demand, they use less silver than 45 million ounces. Now again, the data is a little bit lacking. I wish I did more years. It would honestly be nice if I had like averages of decades, like on average in the 1960s, we used this much silver per year. On average, the 50s, the 40s, the 30s, that would be better than just a couple random years. So we looked at the 1943, but again, 76 million. And it's kind of interesting that, what is this? 17 years later, in 1960, they only made 45 million ounces of silver. 25% were penny dollars. 1943, pennies accounted for 9.3% of coin money. Another outlier, I threw the pennies in as an afterthought because this was supposed to be silver, but you could include nickels. Those are also token money, and I would assume nickels were probably 10% maybe on average, maybe more, 15%. So these percentages aren't accurate because I left nickels out, but it's still interesting. They're still indicative, if these numbers mean anything. 1890, so I was holding off on this here. I think I already explained it. It turned out to be a abnormality because they didn't make hardly any quarters or halves or dimes, but they did make a shit ton of dollars. But they were still making gold money back then. So if you looked at any year before 1932, gold money was a big part of it, because you had the $2.50 gold piece, the $5 gold piece, and the $10 gold piece. And we still made $60.2 million worth of coined money in 1890, and we barely made any quarters, halves, or dimes. We made a lot of dollar coins, though. Pennies only represented probably barely 1% of total coin money. Less token money, it seems. Again, I think this was a random year. But you can see, they didn't make $2.50, totally negligible. Same with the $5 gold piece, not too much. $10 gold piece, a little more. 36,000 ounces. And they made a lot of these, the big double eagles. $20 gold piece, they made, how many they made? 969,000. It represented 938,000 ounces troy of gold. And it accounted for 32.2% of US dollars coined. The other huge ones, US dollars represented 63% of total US dollars coined. So interesting. They used 30 million ounces of silver that year. But these figures where dollars were, 38 million, there were other years close to 1890 that were similar. 1879 even, they probably made quite a few, and those were probably better years to look at because I'm sure they made more quarters and half dollars. But what do you think? Is this an interesting chart? Did you learn anything? Or I think more importantly, does it raise any questions? Does it give you any ideas? Let me know in the comments what you think about it. It took a lot of work crunching all the numbers, but I think if you had more data, more charts, if you included more countries and total silver usage per year, I think it could give us a little more insight on where we were and where we can go. Anyways, have a great weekend.